we're going to get started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting for the month of March 2018. Victor, if you could please take roll. Of
course. Chair Everardo Rodriguez.
Here.
Vice Chair Beatriz Cerrillo.
Here.
Councilmember Rosario Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Linda Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Rosario Lopez. And Youth Member Yesenia Mendez.
Here.
Thank you. We will have public comment. Anyone may speak up to 2 minutes on any topic not on the agenda. Please fill out a speaker's list. It'll be given to you by the table at the front. The council may not discuss or take action on items not on the agenda tonight. And these are this would be public comment for not agenda items. So the public comment for items on the agenda will just take them right after the each item. And we will begin with item number 1, the consideration of a use permit renewal pursuant to section 6500 of the San Mateo County zoning regulation to allow the continued operation of an indoor multipurpose and recreation facility located at 3151 Edison Way in the unincorporated North Fair Oaks area of San Mateo County. The presentation will be provided by Summer Burleson from Planning and Building Department.
Good evening, Chair Rodriguez and members of the council. My name is Summer Burleson. I'm a project planner with the San Mateo County Planning and Building Department. The applicant for this item is seeking a use permit renewal for the continued operation of an indoor multi-sports and recreation facility known as Sports House, located at 3151 Edison Way in the North Fair Oaks area. The facility is located at the corner of Edison Way and 5th Avenue. It was established with use permit the use permit was approved in 2011, and the facility opened in 2012. The facility is bordered by the railroad tracks to the north, two-family residential zoning district to the south, and matching M1 light industrial Edison NFO zoning to the east and to the west side, adjacent sides of the property. The property contains a 69,000 square foot building and a 3,000 square foot building that are used to support the youth and adult sports programs that are run out of the Sports House, and contains 125 parking spaces on site within the premise of the property. The use permit renewal requires a finding be made that the establishment, maintenance, or conducting of the use will not, under the circumstances of the particular case, be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood. The use permit renewal being sought is for a new 5-year term and is recommended to include one administrative review that would include a referral to the North Fair Oaks Community Council at the midway point of the new 5-year term of the permit. The facility has maintained substantial compliance with its applicable conditions of approval since the facility's establishment in 2012. The applicant has also been cooperative in responding to concerns raised through past administrative reviews at previous council meetings related to garbage, landscaping, traffic, and noise. Staff has modified the last conditions of approval to eliminate or update conditions for the items that are no longer deemed necessary as they've already been satisfied, or to update conditions to cover the new use permit term that is being sought. Staff has also added 2 conditions of approval based on past feedback received at previous council meetings related to garbage management and clear pavement markings for ingress, egress from the project site. Perimeter landscape screening along Edison Way has been an issue in the past. In response, the applicant replaced the landscape shrubs along Edison Way in 2016 and have been maintaining them at a level that provides vehicle screening for on-site parking stalls that are facing Edison Way, as well as two for the residential properties across Edison Way. And you can see that in the lower right-hand corner photo of the current conditions. The applicant has installed 2 signs along the residential side of Edison Way to deter Sports House visitors from parking on the residentially zoned side of Edison Way. They've also provided over 6 A-frame signs with similar message to residential neighbors to use at their desire. And you can see that in the 2 right photos. Staff was unable to find any filed complaints with the Department of Public Works, the Code Compliance Section, or the Sheriff's Department for the facility. Upon a recommendation from the North Fair Oaks Community Council on the use permit renewal, the use permit renewal would move forward to the Planning Commission for a decision. And therefore, staff's recommendation to the council is to provide a recommendation to the Planning Commission on the proposed use permit renewal for the continued operation of the Sports House facility located at 3151 Edison Way. And at the end of the staff reports, I believe attachment A includes the updated recommended conditions of approval. So that concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Council members, if you have any questions, please go ahead.
Summer, can you go back to the slide where it shows conditions? Oh, yeah, there we go. And can you, what's the justification for adding these conditions?
Well, currently, typically, use permits have a certain term. In this case, it's a 5-year term. For the administrative review, we typically do an administrative review at a midway point to ensure that conditions are being complied with throughout the term, so that there's not such a prolonged period of not being able, having the opportunity to check in on a facility or an operation. So that's what the administrative review is would be proposing, and that would include a referral to the North Fair Oaks Community Council, as we've done with the last 5-year renewal. And then there were added conditions for garbage management, as well as for clear markings on the ground for entrance and exits, and that was based on past comments that have been raised at the North Fair Oaks Community Council in past administrative reviews. And so we'd like to be able to incorporate those into the conditions of approval, so we have the mechanism to be able to check on those items specifically to ensure that they're maintaining the site in good order with regards to debris and garbage, as well as ensuring that the entrance and exit points are clear for passing by vehicles and vehicles that are visiting the site, because there is one entrance and one designated exit.
But I guess I should ask Sports House, is there a problem in maintaining the garbage? Is there a need for more equipment, or are there complaints from the neighborhood about the garbage?
We've not received any complaints. It was raised at a past North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting from neighbors.
Okay.
And at that time, we had issued a requirement for them to, do an assessment of their garbage facilities on site
Yeah.
to ensure that they have appropriate.
I'm aware of that, Summer, but I guess I'm questioning because you've singled out garbage management. So is it because there's an
No,
issue,
these
or
were
they
singled
need
out.
more
I mean,
recology? I don't know.
Right. No, well,
my
these
question.
conditions were singled out because they're new conditions that have never been added before. So I was just trying to identify new versus previous conditions.
Thank you.
Right.
Not to cut you off, sorry. I'm Brian, I'm with Sports
yeah.
House.
Yes.
When we originally opened up, we didn't have any garbage cans outside.
Oh, okay.
And so one of the meetings we came to, it was brought to our attention that garbage was an issue. So I think we came and we put maybe 6 or 7 garbage cans spaced throughout outside of our facility to help people when they're getting in and out of their cars have a place to throw their garbage.
And is that working?
Yeah, it's working great.
okay.
I mean, we empty those garbage cans every week or
Okay.
2 or 3 times a week.
All right. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question?
I don't have a question, but I just have a think a sports house is really important for the area. I think it provides a safe place for many people to come. Recreational facilities are in short demand. They're usually crowded, so I think this offers an opportunity for a safe space, a protected space, and also it's a place also where there's community meetings, and I think that's very important. It's very accessible, so I think that I think that it is important. It's important, and I support it.
Great. Something else that I would add to what Beatrice just said is that also I believe the sheriff has some sort of parking facility or a hub in that specific location. Is that correct? Does it
That's
continue to be
correct.
there?
They do have offices on that premise,
Okay. Yeah.
and that's intended to continue.
One question I have is, because I am very familiar with this area, I live on Edison Way, and so parking continues to be probably the single most important issue for residents. So the signage that was installed by the county, Summer, that doesn't have any enforcement, is that correct?
That is my understanding, correct?
Okay, so it's just up to whoever parks in there to either respect or ignore
Correct.
the placards.
Correct.
Okay. Does anybody else have a?
I'm sorry. Everett, can you
Sure.
repeat that? The signage has no what?
Summer, if you could go back
The
to
signage that's there
so
now?
So the county installed signage right
Oh,
there.
right, okay.
Which essentially just states that, is no parking available for, except for residents.
Okay.
So asking motorists to respect that, the side of the residential area for residents. But again, there's no enforcement on that. So it's just up to the motorists to, either self-enforce or ignore. Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, I guess my question is, if there's an issue, how can we turn that around? I see the sheriff's here. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I don't know, Mike, what do you, as far as if that's still an issue and there's signage that's not really doing anything?
Yeah, it's, as I understand it, it really isn't enforceable. It's more of a good neighbor type of thing, to use the facilities and not park on the street. As far as it being the right of way, we know that no one has a particular right to any space on the street, and therefore they can use the street. The business has always encouraged them to park in the parking lot, to use the facilities, and to the extent possible, I think that most people have been doing that just for convenience factor, and it is congested in that area, and there's residential parking, and it's difficult to find a spot. The sheriff's office with parking enforcement could always go down there and make sure that there's, the registration tags are on properly, and there's front plates and those type of things, and enforce parking laws just like they would anywhere else. If it gets to be to the extent where it becomes intolerable for the residents, I would suggest that we start looking at a permit parking program.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I am meeting with Public Works tomorrow to discuss that program in other areas of North Fair Oaks. And there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to extend that beta test to the Sports House area also.
Thank you.
Thank you. This problem is not unique to the sports house. Essentially, that whole street, on Edison Way, one side is light industrial area, and the other side is residential area. So there's, all along that those blocks on Edison Way, there is the same problem where, the businesses in front, whether they bring clients or their own vehicles, big trucks, etc., many times they end up occupying, or their customers, they end up occupying the spaces on the residential side. And so, Mike, this would be a great area, to consider for permit. Essentially because, I don't know, you may remember also the, I think it's called Synapse, the school that also came to obtain an expansion permit.
Right.
They also had that same issue, and many neighbors showed up, fearful that the parking is already bad, and with the expansion, it was going to be worse. So it's bound to be a recurrent issue on those divisions that separate, light industrial areas with residential areas.
Yeah.
Okay, and certainly we could, if there's a necessity, we could extend to that. Right now, we're developing the policy and procedures around a program, and I'll be happy to report to the board next month the progress we've made, but I've asked Public Works to make it a priority.
We'll appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions from council members? Okay, then we'll proceed with public comment. And Manuel Contreras, is your comment about this issue? Okay, please go ahead. And you have 2 minutes.
My name is Manuel Contreras. I've been going to Sport House ever since it opened. I play almost every day. That place is like home. I used to always be out in the streets and stuff. That's a place that I can go, and it feels like home there. Not just because it's a sports facility, it's also a family environment. On days that I play football on Sundays, I bring my nephews, my cousins, and they have a jumper house and things like that. Instead of taking them out, or whatever, we take them there. It's safe and fun. They have food, everything. So, I have nothing but positive things to say about them. Redwood City always needed something like this, and finally we have it. And so, thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much for your comment. Gabriela Valencia.
Oh, I haven't seen her in a while.
Good evening. As you heard, my name is Gabriela Valencia, and I live across the street from the Sports House. I have lived in North Fair Oaks for more than 20 years, and my main concern with the Sports House is the same concern several neighbors raised from the very beginning, where when this business was being created, they were closing Maida beer distributor, and they were trying to open this new business. And many neighbors at the time raised the concern that, and myself included, that there might not be enough parking inside the facility, and that this may spill over to the street. And this has been a problem all along, and every time this issue comes up for review, I come and speak about it. And despite the signs on the streets, and the thing is that there's no way to police these people when they come. And so people park on the street either out of convenience, because it's actually closer. Sometimes it's closer to park across the street and just walk in through the front door than to go all the way to the back. I've seen that happen many times. Or sometimes it's because there's just not enough parking inside. And that happens at certain times of the day and certain days of the week. And I just think that the main issue is that the capacity of the facility at certain times of the days, on certain days of the week, is just more than what they can handle with the parking slots that they have inside. And This affects me personally because I live across the street and my house has only one space for only one car in the driveway, so I rely on parking on the street, as many of my neighbors do. And the problem is compounded for me because many times people park on my driveway. So I'm not able to park on the street, and I'm not able to park in my driveway either because they're blocking my driveway. And so I have tried calling the towing truck, and they've told me, no, we can't tow anybody just from the street because they're parked on the street. And then other times, I've tried going to the sports house facility and having them call somebody out to come out. But then in those cases, I deal with people that are verbally aggressive towards me. So it puts me in a very difficult situation. I wish there was something better that we could do. I know you guys are working really hard, but you're inside doing your work, and we are outside dealing with, the overflow of the parking.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Through the chair, if I may,
Yes.
in response to that, if anyone does block a driveway, the vehicle can be towed, but it would have to go through the sheriff's office to be towed. So you should be calling the sheriff's office through dispatch.
I've done that, but they don't come. I've done that multiple times, they don't come.
Well, I would like to look into that if you know the times that they didn't come, because maybe they didn't come when the vehicle was still there, but I'm sure that they came at some point in time because obviously it's a lower priority call, and depending on what's going on. But I'm sure if there was a complaint made that at some point they did respond, and probably the vehicle was gone by that time. But it is a violation of the California Vehicle Code to block a driveway. If they can't locate the owner, they will tow the vehicle.
Thank you, Mike. So there is a council action for this
Yeah.
permit application.
I had another.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah. I guess we have to keep in mind that if that area goes to permit parking, number one, everyone has to be in agreement. Okay. So start thinking about that, if your neighbors are going to agree to that. But second, if it goes that route, then Sports House is going to have to come up with some alternative parking. So you might start thinking about that also. Where can you spill the parking over to? There's some businesses across the street that shut down at, 5 o'clock? And I see empty parking lots there. This isn't going to work without this, so you might have to start looking at that, because it's the same problem I heard the last time this came to the agenda. So I'm just thinking about that. It may be a good thing. I agree, it's a good facility. It's a good community benefit, but this issue about the parking is a problem. I would actually suggest that we add that as a condition. Summer, when's the next review on this?
It's 5 years.
No, there's a mid.
Oh,
With the North Fair Oaks Community Council?
No,
Or,
no, just
Application.
from your office.
if a recommendation is made by the North Fair Oaks Community Council, it would move on to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission meeting would be probably April or May.
Yeah. I'm going to, I don't know if it's going to be in the form of a condition. Melissa, you might help me with this. But how can we build this into it that Sports House start coming up with some ideas on where to put spillover parking, whether it's sharing with another business or something.
Can I just say
don't
one
know.
thing on that topic?
I don't
as
know.
we're talking. So we do have an agreement with Synapse, which is the school down the street, to use their parking lot when they're not in use.
Okay.
And then we do the same thing for their large events. When they have like a whole school event, they use our parking lot because we don't want it to spill over.
Already.
And so we are working with a couple others, but that's the big one that they would agree to, because we understand parking is an issue. And so we absolutely have them use our parking lot when they're doing big events too.
Great, thank you.
So we're going to just follow up, I guess, with the
Um,
permit.
Yeah, and we can hear, perhaps next time from Mike, if you can
Absolutely, I should have some more information from
get us some feedback, that'd be great. So if somebody can have a motion,
May I?
or if there's a,
Thank you. That is something what Brian mentioned with regards to the parking agreement they have with other businesses. That could be something that could be incorporated as a condition of approval, I believe. So, something for the council's consideration.
Well, and yeah, it's thinking ahead because I think permit parking might work for this area, for your area. But again, everyone has to be in agreement. So the people that are parking there now are going to have to go somewhere else. And not down the street in front of someone else's house, but, something.
or think about
Something has to
alternative,
shift.
alternative transportation too, yeah. I mean, that's what other cities do, many other cities, when they have those particular issues. I mean, Berkeley comes to mind right around the university, when they have those big issues with parking, they have created residential areas that allow for the residents to get sufficient parking. And then customers, they just have to find an alternative, either use public transportation or find a parking elsewhere. So it would be best for this area.
Well, I will go ahead and motion to accept the recommendation for the use permit renewal for 3151 Edison Way Sports House.
And were you going to include the condition you were saying, or that's a separate?
I think I want to do I should do a separate.
Is that right, Melissa?
I would recommend that you,
Or put it all
you
together?
could put it all together,
Okay.
a motion, if this is what you're intending, a motion to recommend that the Planning Commission approve renewal of the use permit with the added condition that the sports house investigate shared parking arrangements, or something along those lines.
Okay. Okay, let's do this again. I'll motion that council approve the use permit renewal application for Sports House with added conditions that some type of contingency plan be put in place for alternative parking and review and assess permit parking for that neighborhood.
Is there a second for that motion? You second? Very well. All those in favor, say yes.
Yes?
Okay, and so as to avoid any personal conflict, since I live right in front of this place, I will abstain myself. So the motion carries, right, Victor? Yes. So motion carries, the permit is granted. Thank you, Summer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of a proposed 2- and 3-story 90-unit residential elderly care facility requiring a lot merger to merge 6 parcels into 1 parcel, zoning map and text amendment to rezone all 6 parcels, 1 parcel zone 2-family residential district R2, and the other 5 parcels zone neighborhood mixed use El Camino Real NMUECR to planned unit development or PUD, a general map plan amendment to change the land use designation of the residential parcel from multi-family residential to commercial mixed use or CMU, a grading permit to approximately 11,000 cubic yards of excavation for the proposed facility. The proposed facility's 63-space underground parking garage, and a general plan conformity for the vacation of a dead-end alley and public sewer easement located northeast of Selby Lane. This project is located at the corner of El Camino Real and East Selby Lane in the unincorporated area of North Fair Oaks in San Mateo County. And we will have the presentation by Carmelisa Morales from the Planning and Building Department.
But in fact, I'm Dave Holbrook. I'm a senior planner at San Mateo County. Welcome. Thank you very much. Carmelisa's on vacation. She's done a lot of work with this project since it's come in. So I'm here just to go through a brief presentation. All of these slides that you're about to see are included in the staff report. And what we have this evening is essentially the same project that your council reviewed under what we call the pre-application review process back in May of 2017. There have been some changes, as you'll see, minor articulation, some improvements, street trees, et cetera, some details ironed out. The applicant is also here to provide a brief presentation about this project and their association and experience with senior living facilities. So this was described, and you have the staff report in front of you, and it's a lengthy report, and what you're actually seeing, since they've now applied for the application for which you saw the pre-application last May, is this is starting to get structured very much like we would eventually be taking it to the Planning Commission. Mm-hmm. And so we have a 2- and 3-story facility for 127 elderly residents across 90 units, 63-space underground parking garage. The main entry is off of Selby, which you see in the plan there, right off of El Camino Real. There's also an access road for all delivery and such actually off El Camino Real, so that's where all the delivery comes, right to the left side of the building there off the main road. There is removal of 14 significant trees on the property. There's going to be substantial replanting of additional trees, and as was said in the description, particularly because of the underground parking, it incurs 11,000 cubic yards of grading. What was also mentioned was the subject abandonment of a alleyway. What I want to do is just, we have several parcels involved. And what you see from the report when it boils down, and the reason we seek your recommendation so we can take this to the Planning Commission and your comments this evening, is we've got 3 critical things besides merging 6 parcels together that comprise this 2.4 acre parcel. And what this says, and it's in the staff report, just specifies what the general plan designation is and the existing land use. And what I want to get to is that one right there. Kind of in orange are the 6 parcels. And what we have, the current zoning along El Camino Real that occupies 5 of the 6 is neighborhood mixed use. We call it NMU. And that was a logical outfall resulting from the 2011 adopted North Fair Oaks Community Plan. But together with a 6th parcel that fronts onto Markham, which is a residential street towards the back there, splitting off of East Selby, these zoning districts were not written in anticipation of a senior living facility use of this scope and size. And that said, the senior living facility is in compliance with the vision and policies set forth in the North Fair Oaks Community Plan for such development. So again, while the project is in compliance with the North Fair Oaks Community Plan's adopted land use designation, which is commercial mixed use for the parcels along El Camino, the general plan designation of that parcel fronting onto Markham. Markham is sort of an orphan parcel that makes up this entire project site. And it has a multifamily residential land use. It has a different zoning district. And so that designation doesn't necessarily support the scope of the project. And that's why there's a portion of this project before you this evening that seeks to change the land use and get comments to match the same land use of the El Camino parcels. And so in order to wrap this all up into a single zoning, because we do have two different zoning districts, most of it is NMU, but again, this parcel on Markham is kind of this lone parcel that's multi-residential. The planned unit development zoning district, which we have in our zoning regulations, is an ability to take a project and somewhat customize a zoning that pulls all the parcels in. While this is generally in compliance with the NMU zoning, there are a few elements of the project that are slightly different, and the PUD zoning district is the best way, with the required findings we'll have to make to the Planning Commission, but it's the best way to try to come up with a coherent zoning designation that really reflects a facility that our past zoning and even the existing zoning doesn't explicitly acknowledge. We acknowledge a lot of things for high density, as the general plan does currently in the North Fair Oaks area. We have a lot of uses that we've listed, and senior living, and particularly this facility is proposed here this evening, is slightly unique both in its scope, its size, and et cetera. Finally, there is a general plan conformity that you saw mentioned as part of this application. And that's required because there is an alleyway. It's that little orange alleyway that bisects the property. And it's an alleyway and it's a public sewer easement, and it needs to be abandoned formally because it's in the project footprint. And a general plan conformity is required. The Planning Commission considers this to ensure that such abandonment complies with our county general plan, which it does in this case. And there's an aerial view. You see what the existing development is. There's an office building, there's parking lots, there's a restaurant. You see East Selby parking in back. You see that alley and that public sewer easement that would be abandoned. And you see this residence towards the rear end, which is part, again, of the property. John Bentley's restaurant along El Camino Real, just to kind of refresh everybody's memory for where this is at. There's East Selby, and it's East Selby where the main entrance to the facility is provided just on the left. That's a picture of that sanitary and that alleyway easement towards that kind of bisects the property. Markham Avenue, this is part of that parking lot. There's actually a house to the right, but there's a parking lot that extends to Markham. The project extends, and in fact, the way it's designed, all of the project, as you'll see from the elevations, it's two-story. It meets setbacks along this residential portion of Markham Avenue, and actually adjacent to the house that is remaining on Markham Avenue, it's a small a garden area that the facility residents are able to use. And again, that's the single-family residence at 21 Markham, right up against the property. So the permits required, right? Of course, there's a merger because we have to merge all these together to have them provide the entitlements for the project. There's the zoning map and the text amendments, and remember, we're zoning to planned unit development. There's the general plan amendment. Primarily just that single lone residential parcel on Markham is the thing that triggers the general plan amendment, so that we can get that coinciding with the general plan amendment or the general plan of the other 5 parcels. There's the grading permit and the general plan conformity. So right, this came before as a pre-application. We don't have a date yet on when it will go to the Planning Commission. It is critical to get your recommendation and your comments this evening so that Carmelisa can incorporate that with responses into the report. There is a CEQA review that would also be required. That's yet to occur. However, critical is the comments from you this evening. So there's the site plan. On the very bottom, El Camino Real. You see the parking. The parking is underneath on the ground floor. The entry is right off of East Selby on the right side of the plan. You see Markham, which starts getting into a bit of a residential district, but right adjacent to the single-family homes right to the top of the property. Not only is this setback, this is a 2-story development on this side. It's 3 stories fronting onto El Camino. And you've got this garden area to really provide a bit of a space and a relief given that it's backing up into a residential property. Underground parking, first floor, there's a large atrium lobby that, from which you enter on East Selby, upper floor showing the rooms. And you've seen these elevations. They're not that different from what the pre-application review, but they are certainly refined from what you saw last year. The articulation, the materials have improved, the landscaping has come in. A lot of technical questions have been answered to comply with the requirements. And I might add, the applicant is also here. We'll be doing a brief presentation after I'm done, just to kind of give you the background of their project and their history with it. And there we are, El Camino Real and East Selby. You see the 3-story project heading down East Selby and kind of winding over to Markham, leading to your left. This project drops down to 2 stories. The setbacks start coming in more aggressively to provide some buffer in a residential neighborhood. There it is from Markham, adjacent to the house that is remaining, but it's definitely set back, and it's of a slightly different, more residential design that is better reconciling. There's lots of trees, several trees to be removed to accommodate this project. There's an aggressive landscaping plan that would be coming back, which would include street trees just along the sidewalk and along the right-of-way of all the streets that surround this property. So there's the land use designation, as we covered. It's a slightly higher density achieved from the adopted North Fair Oaks Community Plan. It's a consistent designation of density throughout the merged property. This just goes over the zoning that I've covered and why the PUD is critical to place over all 6 parcels to accommodate this project. Tree replacement, all trees, 1-to-1 replacement. They're being replaced with oaks. All oaks are being replaced with oaks. The PUD is required. It just provides an idea. This is in the staff report as well, with the development standards comparison, what the NMU says today, what's proposed. And what I want to get to, the height is slightly different than what the NMU development standard is. And again, when you propose a plan unit development, which is what PUD is, you are able to customize, but with findings made to justify it, slight changes. Sometimes there are setbacks. That's not the case here. Height is a case as the 3 stories comes onto El Camino Real. There's a few things that are different. Technically, this has less parking spaces than what we might ordinarily require out of our, in some ways, a little bit antiquated parking standards. However, on this kind of a assisted living elder care facility, you don't get the number of cars that are typically generated by residential facilities, and the applicant can speak more to that if you have questions. The environmental review is yet to be done. There was as you may recall with the North Fair Oaks Community Plan, there was an EIR prepared for that plan, and we're looking to ensure compliance with that review that was done. So we have a recommendation before you this evening. It is about the lot merger, the text amendment, the general plan amendment, the grading permit. It's all under the mantle of one project application. And what I just wanted to These are just some illustrations of the project that have been prepared by the applicant. They're also in as attachments in the staff report. Many of these same graphic attachments are also going to be part of what's submitted to the Planning Commission. And that concludes the presentation. So any questions for me? I'm happy to answer them now, but I know the applicant would also like to take a few minutes and do their presentation, and then we could save the questions for when they're done, and either of us or whomever else needs to provide answers can take those questions.
Thank you very much for
Good,
your
thank you
presentation.
very much.
Thank you. I think it would be good to have both presentations, and then at the end we have questions for both.
Good.
So if we can have the applicant's presentation, please.
Can you see that?
Good evening, staff, members of council, public. Thank you very much for having us tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity to finally present before the North Fair Oaks Community Council. My name is Jerry Leung. I'm the Senior Vice President of Development at Sunrise Senior Living. It's my pleasure to be able to bring forth to you the product of many, many months of hard work by our team who's here with me tonight, as well as with staff members and with other members of the community and the public at large. If I may, I'll just take a little brief moment aside to describe who Sunrise is, and to provide some context for what this project's intention is supposed to be and what our vision for the project would be as well. So Sunrise Senior Living is one of the nation's oldest and largest senior housing developers and operators. We were founded 36 years ago by Paul and Terry Clausen in Northern Virginia. And from some very humble beginnings, the first Sunrise, the second Sunrise, the third, we've expanded over the last 36 years, and now today we have 322 properties across US, Canada, and the UK. We've been here in the Bay Area for almost 2 decades. We have a number of Sunrises up and down the peninsula. Our most recent one just opened on the East Bay over in Pleasanton. And right before that, we had a brand new Sunrise open up in Burlingame. And so we've had a lot of experience here serving the general public and the residents of this San Francisco market for quite a while now. And when we were looking at our maps and looking at where our current coverages are, there's really this big hole in the donut, so to speak, between our existing Sunrise further south in Palo Alto and the next one further north in Belmont. And so it made a lot of sense when we considered, the rising demand and the need for our services to find an opportunity right here in this area. So we're very fortunate over time we were able to connect with the owners of this current property and begin working together to potentially bring a Sunrise to the public. So what is Sunrise? What is assisted living? What's senior living? Those words mean a lot of things to different people, and so I'll just be very brief. For Sunrise, assisted living means high quality, high care for elderly people with needs. What is it not? Well, we are not independent living. Our average age is probably a bit older than most people would expect. So rather than serving 65-year-olds or 75-year-olds, on average, people who move into Sunrise are 85 years old, and they have significant needs. And they move in because they've had a change of life event and they need help. What are we not? We're also not skilled nursing. So we're not a medical facility. We do not employ doctors. We do not perform medical services on site. We might bring others, skilled nursing, we might bring some home health or additional services on site, but we ourselves do not perform medical work. So what that means is that, in effect, what we're doing is helping to bring the elderly who have needs with assistance for bathing, for dressing, for feeding, for taking medications, for toileting, or more important, or very frequently, and this is one of our most critical services, assistance with dementia, with memory loss. We provide a place where families and who have loved ones who struggle with some of these things can move in and be in a place where they're well cared for and provide a significant relief to the family who had been caring for them themselves. And so what that means is that this property, this 90-unit assisted living facility, is going to be a relatively low impact on the broader community. And it's going to provide a really critical need, a critical service to those in not just North Fair Oaks, but in much of the surrounding area. And we spent a lot of time working quite closely with the public and with staff and trying to figure out how we can best mitigate impacts of a project on the entire surroundings. And similar to the presentation staff had just given, we put particular thought as to the different sides of the building and the adjacent, what it's near, and how can we really orient it towards the people who are on various ends. And so to that effect, we've purposely built up the 3-story building on the El Camino frontage. And we've purposely moved the access for deliveries and for the commercial activities to be straight off of El Camino Real, shielded, using the building itself as shielding to prevent sound and noise and visual impacts from reaching anybody who live in the community to the rear. In the same way, as we were thinking about it, the most quiet aspect of our use is actually our memory care side. It is a secured environment. It's protective. Our residents, our residents there live in a well cared for and safe environment. And so what we've done is we've shifted the building down to 2 stories about halfway through. So you can see on the board right here on the top of the easel, the mouth of the garage actually sits at the exact same current opening as the mouth to enter into the restaurant does today. So we've kept the curb cut exactly where people are all accustomed to seeing cars enter and exit. And I think it's maybe raised by the public today, but our intention is for all activity to exist, all vehicle activities to exist from that mouth towards El Camino and nothing really to the rear. There's no other vehicle access or pedestrian access for anybody into the facility past that entrance. And so everything is going to be oriented back towards El Camino. And you can see that the building itself begins to drop immediately right by that entrance, and it becomes a 2-story building as it moves its way towards Markham and drops. So that 2-story building is actually all of our memory care units. And in particular, the gardens, as was mentioned, over at the very northern edge are a secured memory care garden. It's an opportunity for our residents to have fresh light and air and be able to really improve quality of life. We've found that to be a really critical aspect of that. To speak really briefly also, because of an issue, the issue previously raised tonight regarding parking, the reason why, as we've considered using the entirety of all those lots, is to be able to add in sufficient underground parking in order to be fully satisfying all of our needs. And so the underground parking garage is actually quite expansive at 63 stalls. The vast majority of assisted living properties here in California or throughout the country would have a significantly lower minimum requirement for parking. And so we think this is actually quite nice and is going to both help serve and protect the community from experiencing any parking off-site from us. And so what you can see is that orange kind of rectangular lines through the center of the site is where vehicles would access. They drive into the site and into the building and then down into an underground parking garage. And so everything is well contained, self-contained on our property. It's on our property. Additionally, one of the things that we worked really hard on is to improve the landscaping and the streetscaping. And so some of the imagery that you're seeing here along these boards, these renderings, what we're actually doing is there are a significant number of existing trees that run along the edge of the property that will be retained. And so here on the screen, what you see with the faded green is that there are a number of mature trees that are there today that are quite tall and act as natural screens, and we intend to be able to maintain them. And so the building will be naturally screened as well. And so, what else? There's certainly additional work to be, the work that we've worked closely together with staff and with the neighbors regarding landscaping, regarding design. We are very happy to make continual adjustments to that as necessary, but we believe we captured a lot of the requests that have come in. And fundamentally speaking, what we're really offering is to the broader community is a really critically needed service for folks who live in this area, who ultimately will have this particular need, if not for themselves, then for their loved ones. And so we're very excited to bring this project before you. I'm sure there's lots of questions, and we're happy to answer any of them tonight.
Thank you very much. If council members have any questions, please go ahead and ask. Go ahead, Rosario.
Like around how many employees are you gonna have in that place?
Yeah, so the exact employee count will vary because we will be hiring as per the needs of the residents, but approximately around 100.
100. Because all those employees are going to be using those parking spaces?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So our employees run on 3 separate shifts, right? Because this is a facility that cares for the elderly. It has to do so on a 24/7 basis. And so when I say 100 employees, I don't mean at one single time, right? That's spread over the course of 24 hours. So on a peak shift basis, that's probably going to be closer to about mid-40s or so. Some of them, and the employees will kind of run the whole range of everybody from the executive director, who's in charge of the entire facility, we call it a community, to everybody who does on the front lines, who provides direct care. So there's some carpooling services. One of the reasons why we are really excited about finding this opportunity on El Camino Real is the availability of public transportation along there, and so. Our overall usage of the parking spaces, because with an average age of 85, our residents really don't drive. There's very, very little, if any, usage of cars by our residents themselves. The parking is ultimately intended for employees and for visitors.
Thank you. It's just I was want to know that that doesn't affect the residents of the neighborhood about the parking. That's a problem in all neighborhoods here. That's why my question.
Okay.
Thank you, Rosario. Anybody else? Linda, Beatriz, Yesenia?
Yes. Can you go over that parking again? You're going to have 63 parking stalls.
Correct.
And you're saying that the 100 or so employees are on shift, flex schedules, and each period would be about 40, there'd be about 40 employees? So that only leaves you 23 parking spots
Yeah. So,
during one shift. So is that going to be
Yeah, so that's, right now, that's more than sufficient
Oh.
for our current uses. So the average Sunrise probably has, of approximate similar size, would probably have about 40 spaces. Many of our existing ones in Burlingame, in Belmont, in San Mateo, and Palo Alto have significantly less spaces than this. So this is pretty generous in that front.
And Jerry, I have a question about the trees.
Yes.
The 14 significant trees that you have down for removal, I remember in our
Pre-application process.
pre-application process, that was one of the issues about preserving the trees.
Correct.
There's a lot of old, what do you call those, heritage
Correct.
trees? And I thought I saw a slide where it says if an oak is taken out, it'll be replaced with an oak. But, I mean, 14 trees will be removed?
Yeah,
Is
so.
that all from the Markham side?
Yeah, so I'm pulling up the existing tree
Oh,
plan
okay,
to help
okay.
identify that for you. And so we actually have not altered the tree removal from many of the earlier discussions that
Oh.
we've shown with you. And Joe, and staff can come up and provide additional detail and perhaps additional comfort. But as you can see, the vast majority of the trees are along the El Camino side or interior to the site itself. All of the significant discussions we've had in the past about maintaining, preserving all of the mature trees facing Markham and East Selby have been preserved as we discussed. We have not altered that. Yeah.
And then, thank you. And my third question, there's been a lot of pre-development conversations with the neighborhood, with the Selby Park neighborhood, and there were certain contingencies that were listed so that reflecting a community benefit back to the neighborhood for this massive, construction, massive development. So are you in agreement with all of those? They're not listed in, council doesn't have, well, we have the letter from the Selby Park Association, but is that, so you're in agreement with everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it
I
up.
don't know if we need to break it down or what.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. And so the letter that was circulated and received it highlights a couple of particular additional work to be done in the overall neighborhood. And we've had many discussions with the neighbors, and Sunrise is supportive of all of those listed potential conditions that were suggested, such as additional signage, such as additional street improvements for, I think, managing traffic and the like. And so, or for example, like the no left turn coming out of our garage. And so those that were listed within the conditions section of that letter, Sunrise has reviewed and is supportive and willing to accept.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Yesenia.
It's not really a question, but more of a comment. I'm really happy with this whole Sunrise Senior Living, just because I think it acknowledges that age group that kind of is ignored, or kind of like they are pretty much ignored kind of from their family because they have too many needs and the family can't support them. So I think it's really nice that there's this ability that they can come to and they take care of. I had a question about the employees. Will they be speaking more than like one language, more than English, or will they be speaking possibly Spanish or anything like that? Is that a requirement for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we don't make additional languages a requirement for our employees. However, just like our residents themselves, each Sunrise is really representative of the broader community that surrounds it, right? The people who live at a Sunrise are the people who generally live within 3 miles of the building. The people who work at the Sunrise are generally people who will live somewhere between 5 to 10 miles of the building. And so I think, looking around at your broader community today, I think that's representative of many of the employees who would actually be working at the Sunrise. And I imagine Spanish as a secondary language will be pretty common amongst the employees.
I have one question, perhaps for Dave, and in regards to the alley. How does it work in this particular case when how does a public space is converted into a private one?
So let me understand your question. When you say how is a public space incorporated into private, I mean, it's all private property.
Because it's going to, according to what I understand, the alleyway would be part of the actual project, right?
Well, the alleyway is proposed to be abandoned because it's bisecting the literal development. The proposal, and from what we've learned from both the neighborhood and from Public Works, who has some responsibility and critical input as to the use of the alley, is this section of the alleyway between East Selby and where it ends is not so critically used as perhaps portions of that same alleyway as they head, I'll say, coming
Towards
off the other
Fifth
side
Avenue.
of East Selby.
Exactly.
And this is not a precedent to suggest that those other sections would be abandoned. So critical to a general plan conformity, it looks to, it's an alleyway, is its degree of public use critical? Can it be abandoned without any adverse impact to what the public's expectation is of use of that alleyway? I mean, I might say in a lot of projects throughout the county, we'll have a lot of paper streets and alleyways, some of which are used and actually physically there, and some of which aren't quite. So critical is the input to ensure that this could comply with the general plan requirements, that the alleyway be abandoned for that purpose, its access purpose, as people would use it. That we are aware, and certainly the applicant can speak more to this, we're not aware that it's a highly used alleyway, but also in terms of the sewer easement, the sewer connection to this project will be provided. Obviously, it'll be provided to the satisfaction of the sanitary district as well as to the Department of Public Works. It can be provided, however, in a way that doesn't literally run down that alley as it has traditionally. So the abandonment both seeks the abandonment of the alley as a physical entity and the fact that there's a utility down it. And the utility will be reprovided and relocated. But I don't know if that answers your question, but certainly it is the point of a general plan conformity is to ensure that there's no adverse public input or impact to taking something out of commission, such as an alleyway.
Thank you. It answers it partially, actually. So the other part of my question is, so the land itself, how is it transferred to, in this case, Sunrise? Is it sold or is it?
Right, and I might let Joe Leclerc speak to that. Correct. I mean, the alleyway now is a public entity, correct? And then as part of the entitlements to Sunrise, as well as they've picked up these parcels, you're right, that alleyway would be sold to them, but that can only happen when the general plan conformity as part of this entire project as submitted to the commission is approved. So it's all part of something that has to occur.
Good evening. Joe Leclerc, Planning Manager with the county. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. The alley was a dedication as part of a subdivision, and technically it's part of the subdivision and owned by the property owners of the subdivision. And the county has an easement over that alley. When this subdivision, the whole Dumbarton Park subdivision was created in the, I think, 20s. The county opted not to accept the alley. So it was offered as a dedication. The county said, no, thanks, we don't want that. And so, but it was dedicated to the people that live in the subdivision. So they've used it over the years for access. And the lots that adjoin it on either side own to the middle of that alley. And so the public rights to that alley would be extinguished. The Board of Supervisors, on a recommendation of the Department of Public Works and the Department of Real Property, would need to abandon the interests. In this case, the only public interests that the county holds are for the sewer easement. We did accept a sewer easement in the 30s, I think, for that alley, but not the access uses that that Dave was referring to. But those access rights do accrue to the residents of the subdivision still. So, in short, they don't need to buy it because they already own it. In that they own the surrounding lots. But we, the county, would be extinguishing public rights to that alley, that sewer easement. And as Dave said, our challenge or our charge is to ensure that we're not giving up important public needs or public benefits in doing that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thanks very much. So my second question will be, was there sufficient input from the nearby residents surrounding that alleyway?
I think, based on the experience that we've had with other developers, I would say that Sunrise Development has done an exemplary job of reaching out to the community. They've met several times with members of the community to get their input on the project, and independent of formal meetings with the county. So, yes, I think there has been.
Just to clarify, the Selby Park neighborhood has gotten many assurances from Sunrise. I think we started having conversations with you 2 years ago?
A year and a half ago.
Seems like, yeah, forever. But I think I guess what I need to hear is that there's assurance from the county that this project is not setting precedent for future development. This particular project fits, but if you cross East Selby and then go down the alley, the lots are right up against, the homes. There's nowhere to play with it, right? So I think that's one of the other contingencies that was put forth to the county from the Selby Park neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty clear what the project is going to do and all of that. Prior to the pre-development process, that part of the alley was not accessible to the community. I mean, they shut it down. There used to be a Chevy's restaurant, and it used to be, you were able to go through, but the people are using the other part of the alley from Selby down to Fifth. So anyway, I as a councilwoman, I need to hear some assurance from the county. I've gotten enough assurance from Sunrise on this whole issue. And my other important point I just want to make real quick. All of these little extra things we're talking about, should that not be part of the working document? What we're talking about as far as the public benefit, and this project not setting precedent, or it should be a separate document. Because when it leaves council and goes on to planning and then to the board, I want to make sure that they see that piece of it. And the piece that is really important to the neighborhood is the public benefit and the assurance that it's not going to set precedent. So maybe not in this working document, but in a separate document, I don't know. It's something new that we're developing here. But I want to set it up so that as new developments come in, start knocking on our door, that we're set to go. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's clear, and when we develop a staff recommendation to the Planning Commission, we will incorporate those elements of the working with our Public Works Department, as I'm familiar with some of the recommendations for public improvements in the streets, and of course we have some details to work through with our Public Works Department, but those can become conditions of approval as part of the project. And as far as the alley abandonment setting a precedent for other segments of the alley, we believe that that is not the case. If the Board of Supervisors were to decide to abandon this segment of the alley, it would have no precedential effect on a decision about the other segments. Although the other segments are only a sewer easement from the county's perspective, because those are the only public rights the county holds to those alleyways, we would still look at the access use of the alley by the public in making any general plan conformity determination. If somebody were to come in and say, we would like you to abandon this alley, it would be a very different set of facts than this current situation where you have a dead-end alley that dead ends into private property, and you have surrounding, one ownership, and a really, we believe, good project. I think that it's a very, very different set of facts than we probably would encounter in the future.
And I just wanted to add to what Councilmember Linda just said, to clarify that our community here in North Fair Oaks, it is physically divided by the train tracks. So the people who live, near where the Sunrise development is going to be, have no way of, coming across, say, to this community center without going all the way around Fifth Avenue or on Woodside Road. And as you would imagine, a lot of mothers with strollers or, pedestrians in general, they normally utilize any alleyways, any shortcuts, so that they can avoid, going all the way around. And as you can see here in the proposal, in the proposed project, encompassing, big chunks of land forces people to have to go around, especially pedestrians. So that is the main concern, for alleyways. And so I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question? Beatrice, you're good?
I agree. That's always a main concern, because we do have families with, kids in tow and, pushing strollers to safely navigate our busy streets. And so they will usually, if that option is available, go like a back way through an alley just to kind of get away from the busy traffic. So we're always on the lookout for safe ways to get families from point A to point B.
And with that, I'm going to take some public comment, starting with Mr. Ken Mansky, representative for the Selby Park Neighborhood Health and Safety Committee. And you have 2 minutes.
Kent Mansky, representing the Selby Park Neighborhood Health and Safety Committee. In the letter that was distributed early this week and
If you can raise your mic a little bit.
in the letter distributed early this week and passed out in print today, the Selby Park Neighborhood Health and Safety Committee supports the Sunrise Senior Living Development Project based on the contingencies outlined in that letter. Those contingencies are extremely important. It was very good that Jerry Lang confirmed to Linda Lopez that those conditions were accepted, that were aimed towards the public benefit that would come from Sunrise Senior Living. The contingencies that we have asked from the County of San Mateo, two of which are of great concern. And one is that a public right-of-way used for over 90 years, 80 of those years by pedestrians, 90 years by pedestrians and bicyclists, and 80 years by vehicles, that the giving away of public property to a corporation, to a company, should not be taken lightly. And that we are asking for a contingency, not just we believe or we think so, or we want in some form of formal document that this will not influence future projects that likewise seek to incorporate public right-of-ways such as the alley from East Selby Lane to Fifth Avenue because of this project and this advancement. The second was this particular project has consumed an R2 property. We have other R2 and R3 properties in the neighborhood, and likewise do not want this to set a precedence that large ECR projects can just naturally go in and consume bordering properties next to an R-run residential neighborhood. This letter, which is in support of the project if these contingencies are met, are from our neighborhood, and we encourage the council to think about the responsibilities of representing the whole area, including neighborhoods, not just ours, but also the citizens of San Mateo County, when we give these incentives, as it was called earlier, to corporations that don't come with corporate good.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I'm
Malinsky.
15 seconds over my time, but I want to acknowledge Jerry Lang and his cooperation with the neighborhood in the discourse to come to the terms of the public good arrangements. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks again.
Chair Rodriguez, if I may, just really quick, I just want to make it very clear that the county is not giving any land away. That land, the surface, is not ours. It's privately owned. We are banning an easement, a utility easement along that stretch of that alley. As I understand it, the land is owned by the subdivision, which are now the property owners here. So I just want to make it very clear for the record that the county is not giving any land away. We're just banning an easement, utility easement.
If I might correct my language, give away a public right of way.
Public easement for utilities is what we're banning.
Public right of way for pedestrians, bicyclists, and for 80 years, vehicles.
Okay.
Like clarification on the difference between those 10 years? Anyone?
No, from what and just again for a point of clarity, what I understand, it may have been the private property owners who let the public cross it, but it's not a county-owned public right-of-way. It's an utility easement underneath that we're abandoning, but we have no interest, no right to the property itself. Never have, and it's always been private property, and maybe they've allowed the public to pass over it, but that's not a county right to give away or to accept.
And so the public utilities running underneath, would those be maintained now, taken over by Sunrise?
No,
Or
from
they're
what I
just-
understand that those are being vacated. So there's a vacation process in process here that would vacate those, and they would be used. They would be rerouted.
Rerouted?
Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Next, we have Fernando Chavez.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. I live at Selby neighborhood as well. And while the neighborhood supports Sunrise project based on the commitments and contingencies that have thus been stated this evening for the public benefit, we still have concerns in over some key events that may impact the neighborhood. One of those being the parking and construction during construction of this project. How will that impact the neighborhood with workers coming along, trucks, construction equipment, etc.? And also, how will that impact our roads in and out of the neighborhood? Our curbs, our streets, for example, trees. Who will be watching out for that? How is the neighborhood to respond, or to whom do we respond if we see something that needs attention? Lastly, also finding out this evening that, and if it's okay, I'd like to take a picture of this, that 14 trees are going to be removed. We're being told that these 14 trees are on the property of the new property owners, but we're having a hard time trying to figure out exactly where that is, because the trees that we're familiar with are all on the, we feel are on the actual street, not on the property, but that's one reason I want to look at that. And I believe that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just for clarification, maybe either Dave or Jerry can comment on.
You know, one thing we can say, we're not yet, but we will be, and we have to craft the conditions around exactly what the resident just brought up. When any project is developed, there's always the issue of impacts during construction. And that's not only from an erosion and stormwater drainage point of view as a site gets disturbed and vehicles come in and out. It can also be, where are the spoils from the dirt stored? How is it ensured that we don't have any erosion and dust coming off the project site? How is it where employees park who are working on that site? That might not be an issue, say, with the development of a single-family house, but with anything large, it is. And including just the wear and tear, you're not incorrect, to streets that will be accommodating a lot of construction traffic, heavy vehicles for X number of months. And as was spoken to about the contingencies, the applicant is certainly obligated to do street repairs and improvements, as has been discussed. But so what we'll be writing and what is required, and you'll see this when this goes to the Planning Commission, is a set of standards. Sometimes they're rather template and boilerplate, but sometimes for a project that's significantly sized, it's rather customized. And it is all the impacts that we seek to regulate relative to construction disturbance. And it can go from parking, where does everybody park while they're working there, to dust control, drainage, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a lot of specific criteria. Those kinds of plans are both reviewed by us. We're obligated to review those. They're reviewed by Public Works because it's their streets that are going to be impacted. It's the residents in your streets that are going to be impacted during construction. And the conditions are set up to ensure step by step by step as the project starts to unfold, what is it that has to be done by the conditions? How is the project unfolding? What's being checked? What's being inspected? And even assuming, and of course that's the case, as final improvements, say, are made to streets and some of the contingencies you've spoken to this evening, the planning department and every department involved has critical conditions that we need to make sure are met before this project is done. And then we're also happy, and as that kind of a project unfolds and construction continues, we're happy to be communicating too with your council so we can keep you involved. Just once a planning commission or the board approves a project like this, the public is often wondering, so when does it start? And there's a lot of logistics of us communicating with a council such as yourself or even private residents on a lot of projects to keep them aware, and so that they can contact the project planner, they can contact the right person, and everybody knows when it's happening. In some cases, there's signs that go up with regards to construction traffic, and so there certainly will be no unknowns as a project like this unfolds, and there will be plenty of departments, and most certainly including ourselves, who will be watching for compliance with those conditions. But those conditions will be customized for a project this size.
Thank you very much. And last, we'll have, again, Mr. Ken Mansky, this time as resident, not as the representative of the commission he came to represent first.
Hi, Kent Mansky here, speaking as a resident rather than as a representative from a committee. What raised my deep concern in this evening's report were two indications. One, 14 significant trees removed, and two, secondly, oaks replaced with oaks. This image that you see right here, these are R1 properties. This whole curve is filled with large oak trees that were planted by Fabros that existed in the 1920s before Bentley's restaurant. And I don't see any of those trees there. They exist on drawings. They exist in conversations that those trees will not be removed. They exist in emails and documents 1 inch thick. I just want to make it very clear that that hedge of green, of trees, is really significant to our acceptance of this project, because that is right across the street from R1 neighborhoods, and we have lived with those trees. Those trees are significant, and those trees are significant to our acceptance of this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I may just respond. So
Please do.
I'm just confirming to Kent and to the broader public that we are preserving all of those trees right around. So the rendering up here was just to be able to see what the building actually looks like. This is what it looks like with the trees preserved. Right, and so just to be 100% clear to people who may have been confused about, the 14 significant trees, the screen up there that has the PowerPoint, right, those red X's are the 14 significant trees that are removed. And as you can see, there's one up over right by where Markham is, right? But the rest of them, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah. And so none of those trees that run along the boundary of Markham, except for that one that we had discussed in the past, right, that's not new, are going to be affected in the count of your 14.
Thank you.
I'm also going to add one thing.
Yes,
a condition that you will see when tree preservation is critical, and we run into it a lot now, is the applicant would be submitting tree protection measures. So back to the construction stage, lots of things can happen, and if you're not keeping an eye out. So we have a arborist who now helps us. They work between us and county parks. We have applicants submitting proposals for tree protection measures to ensure that during construction, those trees are protected and out of harm's way. And we understand that's a critical thing, and we hardwire that into the conditions, and we ensure that as construction unfolds, fencing is up, fencing is maintained, and that we're tracking all of those activities. So I just wanted to let you know that it's a condition that we take very seriously, right along with everything that's happening during construction.
Thank you very much. And also thank you to the project members for your presentation, and also for giving seriousness to the considerations and the requests that the community members have, given that their lives are certainly going to be impacted in a great measure. So thank you all, and especially for committing to keeping some of the or most of the items that were agreed upon with the neighborhood association from that side. So we will need to make a recommendation on this item, and if I can have a motion from any member. Now, in this particular case,
We need to add some things.
I don't know, Melissa, in this case, so it might be good to add something to the effect of perhaps a suggestion, sort of compromise or condition, if you will, in regards to the alleyway from Selby to Fifth Avenue, which is very much agreed by all parties that it is an alleyway that has a lot of traffic. And so though in this case, it's not the applicant that is going to be receiving that condition, of course, but it would be the county. Is that correct? So can we add something?
So the application before you, and that will be going forward to the Planning Commission, is specific to the project parcel that you see up there. I understand the concerns as it relates to other portions of the alley, and I think if you want to express those concerns in the form of a recommendation to the county moving forward, that's appropriate, but understand that the approval, if one is ultimately secured, would only apply to conditions as to this project on this parcel. But I'm sure the county, the Planning Commission and the board would want to know your concerns as it relates to the remainder of the alley.
Correct. Thank you for the clarification.
So I will motion that the North Fair Oaks Council recommend to the Planning Commission the proposed residential elderly care facility and alley and public sewer easement vacation. With the condition that public good contingencies are accepted as part of the approval. We'll do that other one separate.
And that sounds correct, right? Very well. Do I?
I think Councilmember Lopez
I was going to do a separate motion on the
separate-
other piece.
directed toward the county.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
understood.
This is only on the recommendation with the approved by the owners that they accept the contingencies under public good. That's the motion.
And do I get a second for that motion from any other members? Okay, I get a second. So motion carries.
Vote.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, we didn't vote yet.
All of those in favor say yes
Yes?
Yes.
and yes. Okay, so motion carries.
Okay, I motion that council propose, how am I going to put this? Excuse me. Okay, my motion is that in regards to the Sunrise senior housing, that the county consider and approve contingencies set forth by the Selby Park Neighborhood Safety and Health Committee regarding the easement and public right-of-way. I don't know if I need to be more detailed.
Councilmember Lopez, Mr. Callaghy is pointing out again that as it relates to that alley, the county itself doesn't have a public right-of-way. It's only the easement, but
Yes, I understand that, but the contradiction is that the county has power over the easement, but it's publicly being used. Right now, it is a public benefit. And so that's why I separated it. But it's a motion that the county review and approve that the contingency set forth by the Selby Park Neighborhood Safety and Health Committee regarding the preservation of the existing or the remaining alleyway be preserved.
How does that sound?
I think I understand council member's intent, and if that's the wish of the council, we'll convey it.
Yeah, the motion.
Okay.
Motion.
All right. Do we need to vote on that as well?
Yes.
Okay, so first I need to get a second from a council member.
I'll second.
Okay, and all of those in favor say yes
Yes.
Yes.
and yes. So motion carries. Thank you very much. And next we will get, do we have a supervisor's report?
Not tonight, Chair
Okay,
Rodriguez.
so in that case, how about a county manager's report?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rodriguez. We did have our neighborhood response meeting today, and Councilmember Lopez was in attendance. Thank you. We did cover a couple interesting things that I wanted to update the council on. One was that we had an opportunity to meet with the SFPUC in their office in San Francisco with Mr. Irving Torres and our real property manager, and we had a very good conversation. We met with about 8 members, including the head of that division, and we expressed our interest in really taking a look at the PUC properties within North Fair Oaks, with a concentration right now on the properties between Middlefield and the railroad tracks. And they have given us some direction on how to proceed in identifying those as properties that we would like to do some work on, whether it's a passive or active park-like setting. We're in the process of developing a letter to send to them to express our interest, but we'd like to talk to the council about a process involving the community and what they would like to see at those locations. Again, whether it's a passive or some type of active playground, basketball court, soccer, whatever it may be that their community is interested in. So it'd be great if the community, if the council could think about what they would prefer that process to be like, how would we involve the community, whether we would do, say, a pop-up meeting in the neighborhood, and ask the neighborhood to come out and kind of show them the pieces of property and the possibilities there, or whether we'd rather do something here. So just if the council could think about that, and we'll talk about it at the next meeting, and we should have more information on that at the next meeting also. I wanted to also advise the council that the NFO cleanup is June 2nd, 2018. So if we can mark that on our calendars and hopefully get a great crowd out here again, once again, to work on the community cleanup.
So June 2nd?
June 2nd, that's correct.
Thanks.
And then, last but not least, we talked a lot about the census. The census is going to be very, very important to not only this community, but throughout San Mateo County. Things have changed in the census now. They're no longer going door to door. They're going to be asking for electronic identification of how many people in the household. They've cut the funding for the census in half, which causes us great concern. So we are trying to get out, and as Ms. Councilmember Lopez pointed out in the meeting, we need to do some outreach. And we are planning, the Community Affairs Division is planning on coming back with a budget to the county manager and eventually to the board to put funding specifically towards the outreach efforts and notifying of residents, not only in this community, but throughout the county, of the importance of the census and how to get involved in the census. Every individual counts. It could certainly mean millions and millions of dollars to this county in benefits. So we are planning on putting a lot of effort into the 2020 census. We are kind of leading the charge in the county, and we will bring more to you eventually every council meeting, because it's that important, and we want to try to get the word out as much as possible. And with that, I'm certainly available for any questions.
What's the timeline for the census? When is there a deadline or?
Well, the LUCA part of it right now, which is really kind of identifying addresses, is going on. It's starting very shortly, and certainly Victor can speak to some of that. You've been out in the neighborhoods already canvassing.
Sure. We're currently waiting on receiving our packet from the Census Bureau. Luckily, we haven't received it yet, so we haven't started a 120-day count. But about a week or two ago, the entire Office of Community Affairs team was out, and we canvassed every single street in North Fair Oaks in preparation for that. That included looking for accessory dwelling units, converted garages, and that information is not shared with any other department in the county. We're not allowed to per census rules, but it's just to get a clear picture of how many extra units there are, because we want to make sure that everyone gets counted. We can't rely that if the house in the front receives a census packet that they're going to count the people in the back. So we want to make sure that everyone's counted, because, as Mike mentioned, it's a lot of money that's at stake.
And why Victor's work is so important is because we've hired a GIS expert to really plot those locations and make sure that we have those addresses identified so that we can report those addresses and that potentially contact could be made.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from council members?
Is there a way to, if we know that there's like multiple people in a certain address, to just kind of, do we just forward you that information to make sure that it's on your list so that you can make contact?
That would be terrific, yeah. We would include that.
Great, thanks very much, Mr. Kalagi. Council member reports.
Yeah, I attended Supervisor Slocum and Horsley co-sponsored a seminar today on communication, pretty much. Well, they don't like to say communication. It's how to reframe how you talk about housing. So they brought in some consultants from Washington, D.C., and I thought, oh, do I really want to go? And I ended up going, and it was actually pretty interesting. So I think Supervisor Slocum's office and Horsley's office probably have some documents if council wants to go by maybe and pick them up or call and maybe they can send you the documents. But it's just another way to look at how you talk about something. Because when you say, for example, what is housing to you? What does housing mean to you? It's going to be a different answer from everybody that you talk to. It's just another way to look at things, and I call it communication, but they call it reframing. So how you frame it. But that was really interesting. Number 2, the OYE, 7th Annual OYE Conference, which is the youth conference in San Mateo County. It's going to be at Cañada College. I'm sorry, I didn't get any flyers.
I think it's
I think it's
April,
April.
20,
It's end of April.
28, I believe.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll corroborate in the next
so
meeting.
That's happening. And I just want to put a congratulations to the continued good work at Siena Youth Center. I spent a lot of time there mentoring the little 8th graders and some of the high school kids, and it's great. They're doing really good. Raphael is doing a great job, and yeah, that's it.
Thanks very much, Linda.
I want to share that Rosario and I finished taking like a 5-week workshops through the San Mateo County Mental Health Services. They sponsor it, NAMI, and it's directed towards community, towards parents, and they talk and they go through the steps of the social and emotional dynamics in families, in children, in just all sorts of different information. But we had like a little graduation last Thursday as a culmination of our classes, and we learned a lot. There's a lot of information, but I think it was very well presented, and Yolanda and Claudia, who are the presenters of this particular workshop, did an awesome job. They're constantly recruiting, and they are going to put forth new workshops, but it is through the county, San Mateo County Mental Health Services. It was nice. It was very good.
Thank you, Beatrice. We are supposed to have selection of North Fair Oaks Community Council officers. I'm not sure if we have time. Victor, if this can be quick.
Yeah, well, I motion that Ever remain as chair and Beatrice remain as vice chair, if you're both agreeable to that, unless someone else really wants to do it. I know we're short.
Are either of you interested in?
I recommend that
post?
slate. Ever for chair and Beatrice vice chair.
Are you okay with the continuation of the co-chairs? Okay, I am too, so we can continue as it is. Do we need
motion.
Do we need
That was a motion.
Okay, so
Second.
if I can get a second from council member. Okay, I got a second. All of those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes. And motion carries. And we'll just adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.